So I'd like to invite you to think back to the world as it was 3 months ago. 3 months ago, Australia was coming to the end of 28 years of uninterrupted economic growth, which is the best outcome of any country in the advanced Western world. It also means that if you're less than 50, you've never actually worked through a really major recession. We've all spent the last 3 months fighting the COVID war. And that's been a huge challenge. It's been a differential challenge depending on what kind of company you come from. For some companies, it's been carpet bombed, complete devastation, total shutdown. And for other companies, they're facing the biggest growth in customer demand that they'll ever see in their whole lifetime. And there's everything in between. So the impact of this initial reaction to the COVID crisis is very much been batten down the hatches, cut costs where you can, make sure your people are safe, make sure you can deal with your customers electronically, all of those good things. I'm going to assume that you've now got that in place, and the time is now for boards and for company leaderships to move on and start thinking really hard about what happens next. There are 3 questions that should be on your board agenda now. The first question is, has COVID changed our market? Ask yourself, do we need to rethink the supply chain? Is our customer behaviour changing? Are there new and different types of competitors emerging? How is the environment going to be different for you going forward? There are a range of trends that I think will accelerate as a part of COVID. They're all things that were happening already: business process automation, artificial intelligence, machine learning, Internet of Things. All of those good things were already in train. But as a result of COVID, I think a lot of companies are going to be asking themselves, what do they need to accelerate? What are they going to change about their innovation plans? How are they actually going to take advantage of the opportunities that are emerging? How are they going to shore up the challenges they're facing? That shift in priorities creates business opportunities. And it's really your job as a business leader to be thinking, how do I follow Wayne Gretzky's advice and skate to where the puck is going to be? Well, your answer to that might be, well, I don't really know where the puck is going to be. And that's a pretty legitimate answer. I certainly know it's moving. I don't know for sure where it's moving to. That brings me to my second question, which is, does our strategy work under conditions of extreme uncertainty? The answer to that, you really have to think about in terms of different scenarios. Recovery from the COVID crisis could take a lot of different forms. We could have a relatively quick recovery, we could have a very patchy rebound, or it could be a very slow grind back to the new normal. The only thing we really know for sure about the new normal is that it won't look exactly like the old normal. There are also sectors that don't look too bad right now, that haven't been severely impacted, but where there's an air bubble in the pipeline that is coming through, and they're actually about to go through their toughest times now. Construction is a very good example of that. The building projects that are already started are being finished off, but a lot less projects will be started in the near term. So the bubble is starting to happen. When you want to understand what is going to happen in an industry under pressure, follow the money. One of the most important places that venture capitalists get their money from is superannuation funds. What's happening in superannuation right now? Super funds are very busy transferring cash to members under financial distress. What happens when super funds have cash outflows? They rebalance their portfolios away from long-term illiquid investments like venture capital. What that means is that there will be a bubble in the pipeline of capital available to the venture managers going forward. A second really major source of investment funding for venture capital managers is business migrants under the SIV migrant program. You can imagine what might be going to happen to business migration in the short term. So what will managers do in circumstances where capital is less available? Well, the chances are they will double down and focus on their existing portfolios, and it will be very hard for new companies to raise money. So take a step back. If you're leading one of those companies, you'd be very wise to think about what's our plan to deal with a situation where capital is very difficult to get? How do we manage through that? And then if the scenario turns out to be a bit different and a bit less pessimistic, well, that's a bonus and you should take advantage of that. In conditions of uncertainty, I think that big companies have a lot that they can learn from lean startups. It's really important to identify your assumptions, test them as quickly and as cheaply as you possibly can, and work through to maintain your capacity to pivot as quickly as possible as the facts emerge. That's what I'm really trying to describe when I talk about the availability of capital. My third question as a company director is, have we got the right people and resources going forward? I think your role as a company director is a number of different things. The first one is to support and mentor the CEO. As I said before, if your CEO isn't 50, they probably haven't worked through an economic crisis as big as this one. And it may be that not every member of your management team has the right skills and attributes to deal with an environment that is much tougher and where there's a lot more ambiguity. It might be the team's terrific, but you just can't afford to keep them together. So it's really your job as a board member to be thinking in terms of how do you help the CEO think through those issues and deal with them and make the tough decisions where they have to be made. You also need to think about making sure that everybody is spending some time thinking about what happens next. It's really hard for management to put up the periscope, be looking around and be thinking long term when they're in the middle of a pitched battle. And as a director, I think your role is really to inject new ideas, your experience, your connections into management's thinking so that we are actually thinking broadly about the future. And the final thing is really to think about how do we set targets going forward into 2021. And a really important part of a board's role is accountability of management. But 2021 is not the year to set and forget your budget and hope that it all works out. Given the levels of uncertainty that we're facing at the moment, I would suggest you think very hard about the assumptions underlying your forecast, be revisiting those assumptions pretty frequently. And you might even revisit your bonus targets. So instead of having a 12-month target period, reduce it to 6 months or 3 months. Revisit it as often as makes sense in a very quickly changing environment. Australia's fought the first round of the COVID battle really well. So we're in great shape compared to most countries in the world. But I think in some ways the hard work is really only just starting to begin. It's been amazing to watch how fast companies and individuals have been able to respond to a new environment. But the hard part is about to start. It ain't over yet. The recovery is patchy. It is uncertain. And the best thing you can do is understand what is changing and encourage your people to be as flexible and as resilient as possible. And I wish you luck along that journey.